I'm Gwen, and welcome to this month's Faith and Action Forum that is called Faithful Advocacy at the General Assembly in 2025 with our special guest, Kim Bobo, who is the co-executive director of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. So first we're going to open with a prayer, and then I'm going to do a little intro of Kim, because we are just so privileged and blessed to have her here. Uh, you're amazing. And then Kim is gonna share with us about a really a career and a life and a calling of faithful advocacy in the public square. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, creator and sustainer of our lives, we ask you to help us grow in patience, in endurance, generosity, and grow in courage in the face of the daunting challenges and responsibilities of being part of the public square. Let the way your people approach the public square serve as a signpost to the people around us who share our commonwealth, but not our faith. Help us engage in civic life to demonstrate the values of Jesus of Nazareth, who cared for the sick, the poor, the oppressed, and the captives. Let us make the presence of Christ known in bringing good news of love and justice for our neighbors. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So as you all, I think a lot of you are repeat customers, for which we're very grateful. Each month during the program year, Faith in Action has a forum about the most urgent social justice issues in our society. The Faith in Action team is actually part of the community engagement ministry. And the mission of Faith in Action is to educate, inform, and empower the members of St. Paul's to witness to our faith in the good news of Jesus by lifting up our voices and taking actions on behalf of the common good in the public square. So that's a pretty hefty charge there, all right? But we really are seeking to we've done a lot of education. This is our third year of doing this, and we're really trying to empower the action piece for when you go forth from this place after you have learned all of these wonderful things. So today, again, we are so pleased and honored to have Kim Bobo, who has been working very, 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 very hard this week. The Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy and Interfaith Power and Light hosted their annual Day for All People. Last year it was here. This year it was at Centenary. It was last Wednesday. It was wildly successful, really well attended. A few of you were there. It was very inspiring, and so Kim is taking time out of her busiest time of the year, with the General Assembly having just started, to join us. And while maybe you've known of Kim as she has been in Virginia in this position for the last 9 years. Kim Bobo was a nationally recognized, famous big deal before she came to us. I just want you to know, for her advocacy, outreach, and development work in social justice. She even wrote a book on faith-based organizing called Lives Matter, a handbook for Christian organizing. And she is moved from Chicago, where she's kind of still a dual citizen. And she founded and served as the executive director before Virginia Interfaith She founded and served as the executive director of Interfaith Worker Justice, the nation's largest network of people of faith engaging in local and national actions to improve wages, benefits, and conditions for workers. Thank you. That's just awesome. And prior to that, she was the national organizing director for Bread for the World and an instructor at the Midwest Academy. And it kind of goes on and on. She has done an amazing amount of work to promote the living wage nationally, and we are humbled by your presence. So thank you, Kim. She's going to talk to us about her perspective on how her faith compels her policy activism and advocacy work for the common good. She's going to give us a little primer on how we as individuals can engage and participate across the street, at the General Assembly, at City Hall, even at the federal level. But we're going to be really focusing on the General Assembly because that's what's happening right now. And then she's going to tell us a little bit more about the work of Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. So take it away, Kim.
Thanks so much. It's indeed great to be here. So I was asked first to talk a little bit about my faith journey to advocacy. Um, I was raised in an evangelical home, which meant I memorized Bible verses a lot. Um, and in fact, I have a lot of little we used to have Bible verse contests, like who could memorize the most verses. And I have all these little I was a little competitive, so I have all these little Bibles to show for it. But I think for me, it was really hard to read the biblical text and not get a sense that sort of one of our prime callings is to help our neighbor, really to love God and love our neighbor as ourself. And so I think as I was growing up, I thought I'd be a social worker, or I like music a lot. I sing. And so I thought, well, maybe I could be a music therapist and help people. Um, anyway, and really this whole advocacy world, like I didn't know anything about it. Um, but as I aged and I got older, as I was into college, I started doing some organizing work, doing some tenant organizing work. And frankly, I learned about the work of Bread for the World, which is a national faith based advocacy network. And I thought what they were doing was so cool because it was uh, connecting our faith with influencing public policies, which could not just help people on a small scale, but help people on a big scale. And so I remember going to Bread for the World and saying, I've just graduated from college, and do you have any jobs? And I'll do anything you have. And so they hired me part time, and then they hired me as an organizer, and then I became the director of organizing for Bread for the World. And so just had this marvelous experience of watching the faith community around the nation make a difference in what happens in Congress. Um, I then ended up moving to the Midwest Academy, doing training of organizers. They always called me the church lady uh, because I was the one that was always working with the faith community on social justice issues and trying to do training that way. Um, I then, because I had done a lot of work learning about low wage workers, I ended up uh, founding and then leading for many years this group, Interfaith Worker Justice, that really focuses on the concerns of low wage workers. Um, and then, frankly, after my husband of 31 years dropped dead of a heart attack, I was like, oh my word, I could die tomorrow. And so I worked to transition out of this organization that I founded. Um, and then, so I was done with that work, and I wasn't dead. I was still alive. And I saw this job notice for directing the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. And I thought, well, that sounds right up my alley. That sounds like great fun. Um, and so I applied for the director of the Virginia Interfaith Center. My first application was in December of 2015, and I was hired and brought on, uh, thanks in part to your dear friend Bob Hetherington here. uh, and so I was brought on in February of 2016 to be the new director of the Virginia Interfaith Center. So for me, it was just a continuation of the work that I had done, um, but such a privilege to be able to combine my faith and my concern about helping people, and frankly, doing it in as effective a way as we can with just a concrete opportunity in Virginia. So honestly, I didn't know anybody in Virginia, so it's been a real learning curve for me. Um, but it's been really quite a joy to be here. Um, I also wrote a few books along the way. You know that one, but I have a few other books. But anyway, it's been so lovely to be here. And the Virginia Interfaith Center, we were founded in the 80s. The official date, I think, is 1982, but sort of the history of it goes back before then. And it was really this conversation at the Council of Churches about, should the faith community have a strong role in public policy? And frankly, there were some slightly different opinions around it. Some folks said, no, I'm not sure we should do that. And others were like, absolutely, that's what our faith calls us to. And the group that were in the absolutely, that's what our faith calls us to, including Fletcher Lowe from St. Paul's, um, founded the Virginia Interfaith Center. So we really go back for a long time, and it's really our role has always been to complement the work that congregations do in the social service realm, helping people as individuals, because that is really important, but also our role in influencing the policies and the practices of our government is equally important and sometimes can have way more influence than our individual efforts can have. So we go back quite a ways on this. And at this moment, though, the Virginia Interfaith Center is actually probably one of the strongest state public policy networks in the country. Right, there are really only, I mean, who would think Virginia would lead the effort, right? uh, but in fact, there's really only a couple organizations around the country that in any way have the capacity that we in Virginia have built. And I have to tell you that, St. Paul's has been really an integral part and a foundation of that work through the decades. So I really thank you for that. So, as I've been here and done the work for the last 9 years, I really think there are a few key, unique things about Virginia Interfaith Center and about faith based advocacy. So, one, I like to think of us as we do Micah 6:8. So, we do justice, we love kindness, we walk humbly with our God. And let me tell you what that means for me in terms of the context of advocacy. So, number one, we do justice. We don't just talk justice, we don't just do resolutions. We actually do our best to try to figure out in the 3,000 bills where might be places that the faith community could really make a concrete difference. So we try to be effective. Again, we are trying to do justice in the midst of the General Assembly. Secondly, we are loving kindness. And for me, what that means is that we've got to be respectful and kind to every single legislator. And in the context right now of incredible partisan divisions, I think we lean in to bipartisan work in a way that very few organizations I know do. And frankly, it's not always that easy. But I think our faith calls us to that. That love kindness means respecting and being kind to all legislators, but also being intentionally bipartisan. Now, not only is that the only way it's going to work in religious congregations, right? Congregations are everything, right? They're red, they're blue, they're purple, they're everything. And so, again, for us to be effective working in the faith community, that's how we have to be. But I also think it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to not think that we have all the answers at any given moment, which leads me to walk humbly with our God. which I really have come to believe that, um, our differences are often around worldview and different life experiences, and that we've got to kind of figure out in the midst of all that what might be policies that the faith community could unify around and that would move us forward. But frankly, maybe we're not right. Like, you have to, if you're leading a group like the Virginia Interfaith Center, you have to recognize that we're doing the best we can at the moment to figure out what's the best policy and what's the best way forward to make a difference to help people. But maybe there's another way and we're not right. And so again, I think we've got to go into this work with a bit of humbleness because I'm not sure that God has a clear plan for paid sick days in Virginia. All right? I mean, God says love our neighbor, and at Virginia Interfaith, we've decided that paid sick days is one really important policy that will help our neighbors who have low incomes because 1.2 million workers in Virginia have no paid sick days. So we've been kind of leading the fight, not successful yet, but hopefully successfully soon. Um, but is that exactly what God wants? I don't know. I hope so. Like it seems right to me. But again, we've got to approach all of this with a bit of humbleness. And so, I have met with many legislators who do not support paid sick days. And I'm always like, well, this is the best way we've come up with to have paid sick days for workers. But if you've got another approach, I'd like to hear it, like to figure it out, right? So again, trying to find that common ground and approaching this as, we're going to work for this because we think it's best, but recognizing that, you got to have a little humbleness in this work. So let's talk about how you and I can be good advocates. Now, I brought a couple handouts. If you can you be my assistant and help me? Okay, so I've got two handouts and then I have our general VICPP flyer. So if everybody will take one of these. Okay, so I want you to look at the the handout that says Virginia General Assembly Resources. So, the first thing to do in terms of being a good advocate is to know who your legislators are. Now, I know that sounds obvious, but I know for a fact that not everyone in this room knows who their legislators are because I've had a few conversations already today. Um, so, um, so, um, you hate to put people on the spot here. So again, if we're going to be good advocates, we have to know who our legislators are. So there's the first thing at the top is who's my virginiageneralassembly.gov, and you put your address in. It's really convenient. You put your address in, and it will tell you who your legislators are. So it'll give you your congressional rep, your senators, your state delegate, and your state senator. So we are at Virginia Interfaith, we are concerned about your delegate and your senator. So knowing who they are is number one. Then you want to learn something about them. So they all have websites. So you should go to their website. You should sign up to get their emails so you'll see what they're doing. You can find out what committees they serve on by going to lis.virginia.gov, which is the source of all information related to the General Assembly. Again, I've seen some other states. We have one of the best information services of any state I've seen. It's really good information, and you can find almost anything. So you can find information about your legislators and what committees they sit on. The reason why this is important is the real decisions on almost every bill, the real decisions are made at the committee level and not made at the floor level. And so you always want to understand what committees they serve on because that's where they can be the most influential, which means that's where you can be the most influential. So for our lobby day that she was talking about earlier, that was this past Wednesday, um, I literally wrote personalized messages for 140 legislators, right? So it would say, um, your senator serves on the Labor and Commerce and Labor Committee, so you should talk to him about blah, 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 right? So again, trying to make this effective so that you're not just talking about whatever, you're talking about things that they are really going to be voting on. Yeah, I think it's effective. It is effective, right? But again, if you want to know what your legislators, what committees they are, go to that LIS. Next thing that's useful to know is like, where do they get their money? Because it kind of influences votes sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. It's just useful to know. And then a couple other resources there. I also think a good way to connect with your legislator is to friend them. They almost all have Facebook pages. Friend them on Facebook pages. If you do Twitter, follow them on Twitter. I'm not a big Twitter person. And then of course sign up to get their alerts. Now, so let's say you're starting to get to know your legislator. So what are the things that you can do to influence them? So, the most effective thing always is meeting with your legislator, and meeting with them when the General Assembly is not in session is the best because they will give you the most time then. Which is why a congregation like St. Paul's, if you could figure out, what district is everyone in the congregation in, because you guys probably encompass all of the region, right? And so trying to figure out, okay, you're in District 10 and you're in 12 and you're in 13. And then over the course of the year, when they're not so busy, trying to set up meetings with them in groups, right? That would be incredibly effective. So if you're going to do a meeting, again, I am always impressed with these legislators, how much time that they will give you. So they'll meet in their offices. They'll meet they'd meet with you here. They'll meet with you at restaurants. They are incredibly accessible. Now, again, Betsy Carr's not going to be so hard for you to meet with. Um, but others, right? Again, it's worth meeting with all. I'm always for, you have a little agenda, you have 3 or 4 key things you want to talk to them about, and then you take a picture of you all meeting, and then you enlarge the picture, you frame it, you mail it back to them so they can't forget you. Like, you want to be, because they remember all of those meetings. Second best thing you can do on advocating um, is a handwritten letter or typed, but it's not a form letter, right? It's clearly from you, um, and or a phone call. Now it's hard to get a lot of these legislators cell phones because they're kind of protective of them, but if you get any cell phones, if you would give them to me, I'd appreciate it. uh, but seriously, calls, personal letters, all of those are effective. Not as effective as a meeting, right? Um, Probably next up there are meetings during the General Assembly. Now, again, the reason why they're not as effective as meetings before the General Assembly is they just don't have as much time and they're unbelievably busy. And so you're lucky if you get 15 minutes. You might just get 5 minutes, right? And they're thinking about 100 different things, so they're not quite as focused. But again, they'll remember you. Like, so these meetings that we set up in the General Assembly, they know. They know. You bring 10, 15, 20 people, they know. So again, those meetings,
They might purposely avoid you too.
they might avoid you. Absolutely. I've had some of that. Yes, there could be that too. Um, and then probably the least effective, but sometimes the only option, are those emails. Now, again, people say, well, if they're the least effective, why do you send out so many email action alerts? It's because that's really the only thing you can do when bills come up so quickly. In the General Assembly, we have this very short time period. So the short session is 6 weeks, the long session is 8 weeks. Again, this is for a state our size, that's a little unusual, right? To be that sort of compact. And they don't have to let you know that a bill is coming up until 24 hours in advance. So on most of our bills, we will have 24 hours, maybe we'll have 48 hours notice that the bill is coming up in committee. And so that means the only option at that point really is emails. And so when people are on our email action network, we'll send an email to you that says, XYZ bill is up in committee tomorrow morning. Could you send an email to your legislator saying blah, blah, blah? And then we make it real easy. We give a sample one, and you can change it, or you can just click and send it as it is. How many of you have gotten an email from us in the last couple days? I got two. uh, and so I try and tell people during the course of the year, if you're on our list, you'll get generally one email a week from us, but all bets are off during the General Assembly because things happen so quickly. So the emails, even though they are not the most effective thing we can do, it is the only thing we can do given the time frame that we have. Uh, and they are still effective because I will go into an office of the committee, like if they're voting in the afternoon, that morning I will go to all the people on the committee and say, hey, just want to remind you that this bill is up to this afternoon, wanted to see if you have any questions. And unprompted, the aide will say to me, oh, we got about 15 emails from your folks today. Like, they tell us. And on a lot of issues, 10, 15 emails is a lot. Now, there are some issues that are way controversial and whatever that, there's hundreds of things and maybe our emails won't matter. But an awful lot of what we work on, 10 or 15 emails makes a difference. Absolutely makes a difference. The other thing we do that I think is not common, but is really important. And again, for me, it goes back to that the principle of love, right? Is that when legislators take actions that we appreciate, especially ones that are hard for them, we make sure we send a thank you note. And so you'll get an action alert saying, please thank your legislator for blah, blah, blah. Now, again, we don't do that on everything because we have so many going out. But an example, literally from Friday. So there was a bill up. It was in, we work on issues on criminal justice reform. And one of the problems in our prisons, I mean, there's so many problems in our prisons, don't get me started. But one is that there are extreme temperatures. So there are 7 prisons in Virginia that have no air conditioning. Can you imagine in Virginia, right? Anyway, and they have these tiny little windows. So it's hot as Hades inside some of these cells, right? Um, and in some of the prisons, in the cells themselves, it gets so cold that the water in the toilet bowl freezes, right? So we're talking extreme temperatures, right? That are really it's torturous conditions in these cells. And so this legislator put in a bill initially, you start with a bill that's what you really want and then you end up with something much less. But she started with sort of a bill to sort of improve all the heating and air conditioning in all the prisons. Well, that was $75 million. That was not going anywhere. So it got watered down to a bill to provide fans when it's hot and thermal blankets when it's cold. Now, that's not exactly a radical proposal, um, but so that's what it ended up with. And for some unknown reason to me, this bill became kind of a partisan vote. And I'm always, you don't want those partisan votes, right? You want everyone to support it on the merits. And yet, but when it came to full committee, there was one Republican who voted for it, so we sent her thank you notes, right? She took a courageous vote. Now, why it became partisan, I'm going to go back and try and figure it out, right? Because I think that one should have been bipartisan. We should have been able to have all the votes on it. So, I just got to kind of work on that and try and understand what happened on it. But again, we do try and do those thank you notes, and the thank yous really matter. Um, and again, we will follow up with folks that we thought we should have had the votes and try and understand them because there's probably a rational reason why they voted that way. Except in an election year, there's this horrible thing called party discipline that I despise. And frankly, it happens for both the Republicans and the Democrats, where they are told you need to vote along party lines because of the broader electoral political things. It is what we face. It's not my fate. I don't like it on either side of the aisle, but it does happen. And sometimes, again, you can't judge somebody on some of that stuff. You just got to understand that that happens and keep going and moving forward. Now, so those are kind of the core things you can do as an advocate, but there are a couple others that I think are really super important. Um, One is showing up at town hall meetings. A lot of them do them by Zoom these days, but I think they're more fun if they're in person. But you show up and you ask questions about the things you care about. And it really matters. Years ago, I can remember when we were working on Medicaid expansion, Roxanne Robinson held a forum out in her district, and about five of us showed up, and we sat in all different parts of the room, and we all kept asking questions about Medicaid expansion. And at the end of the forum, she said, "Well, I guess a lot of people care about Medicaid expansion, don't they?" I guess so. So again, it doesn't take that many people scattered around where you can, get them at the minimum, you get them thinking that people in the district care about it, right? Um, Second is media. And there's the regular media like the RTD and so forth, but there's also social media. So on the regular media, write a letter to the editor, write an op-ed. Um, the RTD is actually pretty easy to get into, especially on the letters to the editor. So something is really good or something makes you mad, send off a letter to the editor, and the odds are you'll get something published. And again, people read both the op-eds and the letters to the editor. Um, but social media, we this year have a social media team, which means if you do Facebook, if you would join our social media team, it would be delightful. And what that means is that once a day, you'll get a social media post from us, and you have to share it with your friends. That's it. And so it's 25 days now left, so not very many days left in the General Assembly for you to share the post. So it's only Monday through Friday. But again, that reaches more and more people. So if you want to do that, you can either email Roberta at my staff, so it's Roberta at virginiainterfacecenter.org, or just give me your name and email, and I'll get you added to the list. So social media really matters in terms of expanding the numbers of people involved in the work. Um, then the last area in terms of advocacy, which isn't directly related to this General Assembly or the next one, but matters in general related to influence, is voting, right? It's getting known, personally voting, showing up every time, and it's getting other people to vote. Now, you all have worked with us on our 100% voting congregation program, right? We're trying to encourage congregations to pledge to try to get everybody to vote. Um, and I can assure you, even though you think everyone votes, they don't, right? Even in a congregation as active as yours, there'll be people who are not frequent voters and just don't think it's that important. It is crazy important. And for you to all to become known as a congregation that's always voting. My favorite is 3rd Street Bethel AME. So get this. So when you join the church, they automatically make sure that you're registered to vote. That's part of the new member orientation process. So it's something you guys could think about, right? uh, so I think that's super important. Okay, I only have 2 minutes left or so. So I want to turn to the last page, which is our priorities, and I'm just going to run through it super quickly because there's an incredible amount of dovetailing with the list that you're going to hear about in a few minutes. That's right, that is forthcoming. So we've mostly been focusing our work in 4 buckets. So health equity, affordable housing, working family support, and criminal justice reform. So let me just kind of talk through um, these buckets for you. So first is helping on maternal health. Virginia has a crisis in terms of maternal health, particularly among women of color. And so we have quite a few bills that we're working on in this space. We have an unconscious bias cultural competency training requirement bill. This bill, it passed out of the House and the Senate last year with broad bipartisan support and co-patrons, Republican and Democrats got to the governor's desk. The governor amended it in such a way that you couldn't recognize the bill, got it sent back, and the House and the Senate both rejected his amendments. In the House, they rejected it 100%, right? What does that tell you, right? There's a lot of support, and the governor then vetoed the bill. so so we're trying again. We've been working with the governor's office saying, no, this isn't wokeism. This is, there's literature that shows this is indeed a documented problem. This is fact-based, so on and so forth. We'll see if we can make it through. We are trying to make sure that incarcerated pregnant women get coverage, that there's what's called presumptive eligibility for pregnant women, which means if you're eligible for Medicaid, you don't have to wait your 45 days or something, that you're automatically signed up if you're pregnant, because waiting that long is like a problem. And then we've done a little bit of work on the side around keeping labor and delivery units open in rural areas. Not something that, it's complicated to explain, but our staff got asked to help on this, so we've been doing it.
Knows if Mississippi passed it,
I know.
come on, people.
I know. We like to follow Mississippi and Virginia. Don't mention California and New York. We don't go there. And then we're supporting a few others. The one that I think is going to be very tough to pass this year, but I'm hopeful in the next couple years we can get, is this one called Cover All Kids. This is providing health coverage for undocumented children who would otherwise be eligible for Medicaid. Again, given the anti-immigrant sentiments, even the Republicans, refuse to support this. The Democrats are nervous on this one. So again, this is going to be very difficult to get. But again, long term, that's one we should do. Leading on affordable housing. We have a bill that Betsy Carr is the patron for in the House on faith and housing, trying to make it easier for the congregations that want to use their land or their buildings to do affordable housing, to make it easier for them to be able to do that. I think we've got a very good shot on this one this year. We've done the work on it. It's up tomorrow morning, so we'll see. It's the first vote tomorrow morning.
in there that Ben Campbell did an amazing job speaking about this issue at the Virginia Interfaith Day for All People. He's on the diocesan, it's like the real estate, Episcopal real estate task force or something, where we are really looking hard. I mean, the churches, we own so much land in this state, and really trying to push to figure out a way to leverage that resource with our numbers are diminishing. What a way to proclaim the good news, right? To take these properties that are not being used and to turn them into affordable housing for people.
Amen. We're also supporting more money for affordable housing and tenant reforms. In criminal justice, which is the next page on the back, our priorities that we're leading on are expanding higher education in prison and youth shackling. Right? Virginia's one of just a handful of states that still shackles young people when they come into court, right? What a demeaning thing. So yeah, we don't need to be doing that. But anyway, so we're leading on those, and of course we support restoration of rights and counsel at first appearance. Then on family supports, we are leading on paid sick days. Even if we can get it through the House and the Senate, I don't think we can get the governor to sign it this year. This is one of those bills that is kind of it's a mandate on businesses, and so there's kind of a worldview against that. This will be a challenging one, but again, it's still needed. It's a huge issue for low income workers. And then we are supporting efforts around child care wait lists, the minimum wage. Again, that will go to the governor's desk. I'll be shocked if the governor doesn't veto it again. Last year, we got 400 clergy and almost all the bishops in Virginia to send a letter to the governor urging him to support this. We were front page of the RTD on it. And I thought we actually had a shot of convincing the governor. It didn't work, but again, we'll try again on this. And then we are working to remove the farm worker exemption from minimum wage. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over. Actually, I forgot the questions. I'm sorry. Uh-oh, I talked too long.
No, no, you did great. But how about we introduce our companion
Yes.
piece and then we do Q&A, okay? So if y'all can hold your questions for a second. Bo is going to be handing out a piece that was developed by the Faith and Action team in collaboration with the Community Engagement Steering Committee for St. Paul specifically, called Recommended Policy and Legislative Issues for Faithful Action at the 2025 Virginia General Assembly. Now, you're also going to be receiving this week in your weekly chapel, okay? But first, I want to give a big thank you to Julie Seward, who chairs Faith in Action, Lisa Guthrie, Deb Love Yoder, Sheena McKenzie, David Hoover, and Sean Winetta. Those folks make up your Faith in Action team, and some of them also sit on the community engagement team. They've worked really hard on this document to get the language right, and the community engagement team kind of came in and did a wonderful job, especially a big thanks to Tom and Bruce for helping us tighten up the language on this. But this is meant to really help us actually propel us across the street to turn our faith into action, and not just get educated, but to be equipped and empowered to do all the things that Kim has just done a wonderful job giving us a tutorial in doing. What we've done is looked over all of the great information about legislative priorities that have been put out by Kim and Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy and Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, the environmental justice group that works with the Center for Public Policy. We also, between Deb, Julie, Lisa, am I missing someone, went and actually sat down with either our representatives in this area or their staff members in November to talk about what was coming up. So this is a very well-informed list. So we're not talking about specific bills. We are focused in this on issues. And to get to the way those translate into legislation, you need to do everything Kim told you. Find out who your legislator is. Go to Legislative Information Services, LIS, .gov. That's the way you then get really involved at the bill level. And there are a lot of people in here who have a lot of experience with this, like Tom Smith, like Lisa Guthrie, who've really put in their time over at the across the street for wonderful causes, I might add. Um, but I think it's really important, though. I want to really impress upon you all that we didn't just cherry pick our favorite issues as community engagement or faith in action. We looked at the 5 commitments that came out of our strategic reorientation process, which are racial justice, embracing all ages, being a spiritual center for downtown, progressive Christian thinking, and transformative and relevant worship. We also really sought to align the priority issues with our 5 community engagement ministry priority areas that are racial justice and healing, downtown, environmental stewardship, education, and beyond Richmond. That includes our global missions group. A couple of other disclaimers. The list you have, and we grounded it in in scripture, which we felt like was pretty important. So we try to have a scriptural anchor for all of these issues. Um, they're not in order of any priority. I'm sure we left something out. It's not exhaustive. And it's also not exclusive. This is about empowering us as individuals to go forth and live out the values of our faith in action, okay? And so we know that St. Paul's members also hold a really broad, diverse array of views on these things. So our actions, this kind of gives you a menu to like see, well, what calls out to me as an individual person that worships with this community of faith. So when we do represent ourselves, we represent ourselves as Christians, and we're not representing the whole congregation. So we want to be careful about that. Does that make sense? Okay, so take this home and look at it and go to some of these websites, both that Kim has given you and that we have. I think we have some of the same websites at the end as ways to really track this on the bill level. And yeah, and this will also be coming out in an email. So questions for Kim or others?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question about the unconscious bias cultural competency training. Is there any way to show, I guess it would take a matter of years, to show that that has an effect?
Yes. Yes. uh, there have been not a lot of studies, but there have been some studies of other states that have passed similar things, and there is documentation that shows it matters. Yeah. Again, that's what we've been trying to show to the governor's staff and to his health staff that, again, we're not trying to do just, some liberal woke stuff. There's like documentation that shows that this matters. No, there's documentation that the training helps. Now, it doesn't solve it all, but it does matter. How about here and then there? Oh, he can project. Praise God.
because I have two files for contacts, anonymous. I have my inbox that she puts in. That's where my constituent messages go. And then I have a second one for the ones not my constituents that she puts in the trash can. So it really matters. Matters in Congress, matters in the legislature. And the other thing that I think you touched on that I would recommend to this group that I found helpful as a doc is a story in real life that you're aware of that illustrates the principle, the mode,
Right.
the issue is memorable and sticky and is far better than going in and spouting statistics or data. Now, they need to reinforce the statistics and data versus the anecdote. But I found over and over again that that story or your personal experience, they'll remember that. So God bless you for what you do. Thank you for being here.
He's so right about the stories. I mean, again, most of us, that's why preachers have good stories, right? Because we remember them, right? And same thing with legislators. And there's not a legislator that I know in Virginia who doesn't have a heart for people. Like you wouldn't spend the hours that you have up there if you didn't have a heart for people. It's hard work. So yeah, they really they care, especially the stories from constituents. Your first point
I get
back
a
there.
question.
Oh, okay. And then we're going to get her because she had her hand up. Go ahead, dear Bob.
Well, my question is, now that you've been at this in Virginia for 9 years, are there a couple of advocacy moments that you're proudest of for the Interfaith Center?
Well, clearly the biggest moment has to be Medicaid expansion. Um, that was, 600,000 people in Virginia have health care because of it. And we moved some of the legislators. I know we did. Like, I know we did. So again, it was a lot of folks were working on it. It was a joint effort, but that the faith community was so front and center on that critical issue. I'm crazy proud of, right? Um, and then, one of the things we often um, have to do, honestly, is you try and find these a little bit niche issues sometimes where you can kind of thread the needle to make something happen, right? And so there's a whole slew of um, things around wages that we've done where do you know that every worker in Virginia has to be given a pay stub? That shows how many hours they worked and what their rate of pay is, which is super important if you're a low wage worker because people get cheated of their wages. And part of it is they don't have any documentation on this stuff, right? They have a pay stub because of Virginia Interfaith Center. There were all these exemptions to who was covered by the minimum wage when I first got here. I remember reading the minimum wage bill and just was appalled because it not only exempted the big ones that most states have or many states have, farm workers and domestic workers, right? This is all racist stuff. This comes back to our history of racism in the country, right? In the passage of the national federal labor laws, the Minimum Wage Act. Um, but in Virginia, we also exempted movie ticket takers, concession workers, shoe shine boys. Anyway, there was like 10 different categories of workers that were exempt from the minimum wage in Virginia. And Virginia Interfaith has gotten rid of all of those except the farm worker one. And we've not been able to win that one yet. And we're still fighting on it, right? Absolutely, disabled were too. Again, so we've had, and so there's this whole set of worker stuff that really affects low wage workers that frankly there's no one lobbying on it except us, right? Caring for those poor workers. There's a set of things around immigrants that, again, in the faith community, there's an enormous unanimity around welcoming immigrants. So in Virginia, we have a driver's privilege card for immigrants, right? We allow DACA students to get in-state tuition. There's a whole set of immigrant stuff that we've done that have really mattered. 30,000 home care workers have paid sick days because of our work in this space. So again, there's a lot of things. And again, I think the ones I'm most proud of are the ones where, we've gotten enormous bipartisan support for, where, again, we found that place that there was unity in the faith community, and we've worked with the legislator to build that unified support. Um, and it is so interesting, Bob, when I talk to colleagues around the country, and there's often an assumption that you can't get bipartisan support. And I just haven't found that in Virginia. Now, not on everything. Again, there's this crazy partisan discipline and there's politics and elections, but so much of being able to do it is just having a grassroots network that really treats people respectfully and then going out and talking to them, making the effort to actually do it. So anyway, it's really that's been a joy. That's probably okay. That we skipped the woman in the back. I'm sorry.
Oh, this is a good closing question because it's not related, but but it is related and it's on my mind in view of the future. Um, is there any chance that St. Paul's it's not on?
It's on.
You're on. You're on.
Is that is there any chance that St. Paul's is thinking or would think in the future about being an immigrant sanctuary place for what's to come in our next couple of months with our new president. And I agree, this is totally off the subject, but I'm just wondering, do we think about that at all?
I sure am glad our rector just walked in. It would be a new thing for us. I think it will become more and more something that we grapple with and try to figure out how we can be helpful in the coming months and years. And I know there's a group from Sacred Ground that actually wants to bring a proposal. Who took Sacred Ground? This is our kind of anti-racism training in the Episcopal Church last year. The alum group is really interested in bringing a proposal maybe to our community engagement steering committee to look at ways that we can be more supportive of immigrants. But that's in play, but we're not there yet. Charlie?
I've been partners with churches that have done that, and it, as is the case with so many things, there's a lot of levels to it, and we would just need to explore whether we're a good fit.
And let me say, I've been very involved in the sanctuary movement stuff, both this most recent one and actually the version many years before that. Um, and frankly, all of us who've been really engaged in it believe that the most important value on the sanctuary congregations is the educational value versus the actually you're housing one person, because the amount of work it takes for one congregation, I'm not sure it's the best use of a congregation's energy. And I think that's where an awful lot of us who've been involved in it. So I support it. It's not like I'm opposed to it, right? I support anything that helps in this space. But I think the most important thing we've got to do is we've got to fight for political changes that create a much more humane policy in terms of federal immigration policy. And I am very worried about what we're going to see coming down. And frankly, I think we're going to know very soon this coming week what some of the things are going to be. And I know the faith community is going to play a critically important role in trying to advocate for a more humane immigration policy than what I think we're going to see.
And the Episcopal Church, writ large, has a huge migration ministries program that we should also look to. I mean, there's a lot of work going on refugees and migrants, immigrants, all of the things through the larger Episcopal Church. But I just want to end with this can be very intimidating doing this work. That's why they host things like advocacy days for all people so that there's kind of safety in numbers. And I do want to invite you tomorrow in honor of Martin Luther King Day. And if you're also maybe feeling a little, you need something to do with your a little bummed out tomorrow, please come join us. The church will be open. You can come and join us at 1:30 to gather and walk over to the bell tower where we will join another amazing public advocate, faith-based advocate, Lori Haas, and the Virginia Center for Public Safety, who will be doing their annual MLK vigil and gun safety rally. And then we'll invite you to go meet with your legislator, with other folks at the General Assembly. So if you've never walked into the building and just had that experience and gone up and found where your legislator is, this is a great opportunity to do it. Several of us did it last year, and it being together made it so much easier. So thank you, Kim.
And bundle up.
And bundle up. It will be very cold. Yes. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, wonderful. So again, look for a follow-up email too to all of this. And Kim, we are so grateful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming and being with us today.
And if you're not on our list, please give me your information or take a brochure and get on our list. Thank you.
Right. Go forth to love and serve. Thank you all.